What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the updated version of my hybrid Nightblade solo PvP build for update 42 Gold Road. With the release of Gold Road came Scribing, which has given Nightblade some very strong new tools to utilize, and after testing several different builds, I've settled on something that I'm really happy with. Build has great burst, excellent sustain, solid mobility, good mitigation, and performs well in the majority of scenarios that I find myself in these days. Solo PvP is definitely in a tough spot, but I think that this build tackles it well. And without further ado, let's get right into the sets. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the CMX info page because I think that's a more viewer-friendly experience than me scrolling through my inventory. This page gives all the general build information, and we'll just go over all of it. Starting with the sets, I'm back on Nightmother's Gaze. I think that Nightmother's Gaze is now the best option for solo hybrid Nightblade because of the scribing skill that we're running. We're going to go over that in a little bit. But I'm back on the Nightmother's Gaze train. So we've got an Axe of the Nightmother, Nirnhone charged. This is a shock glyph. Hammer of the Nightmother charged, absorb stam glyph. You can go sharpened if you want. I think charge is better for the more consistent status effects. Absorb stamina gives the 3k pen if it procs sundered. So I prefer charge. It's up to you. You can go sharpened if you want. Rallying Cry, Ice Staff, defending. Weapon damage glyph. Balorgs, bolt heavy, bolt impen. Prismatic defense. Gallant chain. This is the trainee chest, reinforced always on your heavy chest. Prismatic defense. Gloves of the Nightmother, well fitted. Prismatic defense. Rallying Cry, well fitted. Prismatic defense. Medium guards of the Nightmother, well fitted. Prismatic defense. And the light shoes of the Nightmother, well fitted. Prismatic defense. So this is 3 heavy, 3 light, 1 medium. Prismatic defense on everything. These well-fitted, if you want, you can change them to impen. It's up to you. Impen will be a little bit tankier, less stam sustain. I found the stamina sustain to benefit me more than the tankiness, and I did try several different combinations of impen, reinforced, and well-fitted, so this is what I ended up settling on. Got the 2 Rallying Cry rings infused. These are magical harm glyphs, so the weapon damage glyph that gives magic recovery, and I've got that on all 3 pieces of jewelry. I'd recommend going that if you struggle with your mag sustain more, and you can go physical harm if you struggle with the stam sustain more, but it's only a difference of around 50 sustain or so, so it's up to you. Saint and the Seducer, this is the mythic we're running now. This is a new mythic with Gold Road. While in combat, you gain one of 5 random major buffs, which changes once every 10 seconds. Enemies within 12 meters gain a random minor debuff depending on which buff you have. So this is a really strong damage mythic. It also applies some nice debuffs. 3 out of the 5 buffs that this gives you are really strong damage. So we've got Major Berserk, Major Force, and Major Courage. All 3 of those are very strong damage debuffs. The other 2 buffs, Major Resolve and Major Evasion, are kind of useless. They do apply Minor Breach and Minor Vulnerability respectively, though, which are both also decent debuffs. Actually, the same 2 debuffs we're getting from these 2 glyphs, but they apply them in an AoE, so it's not bad even when you get those 2. In general, I think this is your best option for a mythic now, if you just want damage from your mythic. And I've got Swift on that. So Swift, you can go infused here if you want. I think the 1 Swift gives me the mobility that I need while I'm outnumbered, but it's up to you. If you want more damage, go infused. Looking at the CP, I've got Fighting Finesse, Focus Mending, Duelist Rebuff, Master at Arms. Looking at the red CP, I've got Pain's Refuge, Sustained by Suffering, Survival Instincts, and Rejuvenation. Rejuvenation is the flex CP. If you don't feel like you need the sustain that this gives, then you can swap this for 2 things, or 2 things that I would recommend. Technically 3 things. So the first option is Celerity. You can go Celerity there. It's 10% move speed. And once you do that, you can swap this Swift for an infused, and you'll just gain damage and 3% move speed. So that's one option if you don't think you need the sustain on Rejuve. Another option is Relentlessness. Every time you get stunned, you get Major Protection, which is 10% mitigation for 3 seconds. This kind of helps you when you're getting bursted or zerged down, you get stunned at a bad time. It's not a bad option. If you want more survivability, you can go Relentlessness. And the third option, a little unorthodox, is Bastion. Bastion doesn't benefit us defensively in any way, but I'm sure all of you have run into the mag circs that are literally everywhere since they've gotten buffed, as well as Arcanists and, in general, people having more damage shields. This is going to give you 15% damage against damage shields, which is an enormous amount of damage. It will make killing Sorks much easier, killing Arcanists much easier, and killing anybody with a damage shield, which there are now a lot more of since Scribing added a lot of different damage shields to the game. So if you struggle with Sorks and Arcanists, this could be a good option to replace Rejuvenation. I'm going to look at the race attributes, food, and Mundus next. We're going to go to the character sheet for that. So the race that I'm is a Breton now. I've decided to go Breton instead of Khajiit because the mitigation passive that Breton has is really strong and damage is really high while you're outnumbered right now, so I feel like I benefit a lot from that. Also because the mag sustain is a lot more tight now, since I'm not using Elisus, a free skill, and I'm not using Killer's Blade anymore, which is a stamina cost skill. I really feel like I needed more mag sustain, and I ended up deciding that Breton was the most efficient way for me to do that, instead of running a glyph on a Khajiit, for example. You can go Khajiit still. If you're a Khajiit, you're probably going to need an additional mag recovery glyph, probably an infused mag recovery if you're a Khajiit. You might want to consider swapping Rejuvenation for Relentlessness or something. It's up to you, though. I'd recommend Breton. As a third choice, probably Orc or Imperial, and anything after that is equal. So we are on the Shadow Mundus, Vampire Stage 3, Shadow Mundus. This is probably the best Mundus for Nightblade. Then we're using the Bear Haunch food. If you can't afford the Bear Haunch, use the Jewels of Misrule. Bear Haunch is a lot cheaper on PCNA these days, though, so if you can afford it, I recommend using this. It gives you the most stats. The attributes we're running, I've got 30 in Magicka, 20 in health, 14 stamina. This is personal preference. It might even be a little OCD on my part. I don't know. So when I go to my back bar, I have 31k health with the 1 Shadow ability from the 20 points in health, and I have 17k stamina on both bars from the 14 points in stam. You can put these points wherever you want. This is just my personal preference. It's up to you. The consumable that we're using, potions, are going to be tripots. You need to sustain both resources pretty heavily, so tripots are really good. And then I also keep these detect pots slotted. These are immovable detect magicka. I'd recommend you keep detect pots slotted. There are Nightblades everywhere. It can be very hard to get them out of stealth, especially when there's one just harassing you from 20 meters away and sort of preventing you from doing anything. A detect pot can take care of those guys really easily, and sometimes it's worth sacrificing the stamina sustain from the tripod in order to get a difficult target like that out of the way. So I'd recommend you keep these slotted at all times. So next up, we'll look at the skills that we're running on this build. Phantasmal Escape, the Major Evasion, our Snare Immunity. It also is going to give us a lot of stam sustain because it reduces the cost of our rolls while we're getting hit. Resolving Vigor, Heal over time, and Minor Resolve resistance buff. Siphoning attacks, this is the sustain ability and a nice heal. They changed how this worked recently, so it no longer procs off of landing light attacks, and what it does now is while slotted on either bar, all damage you deal heals you for 1438 health and restores 200 mag and stam up to once every 1 second. So just for having this slotted on either of your bars, passively without casting it, you're going to get a bunch of sustain and healing. And then when you cast it, it's sort of like Dark Deal. You're trading 4.3k health for 2.6k mag and stam. This is a lot of sustain. This is a absolute ton of sustain. It is an extremely strong ability, probably one of the strongest sustain abilities in the entire game now, and I highly recommend that you have this on your bar. I'm going to go over later in the video how you should be using this, but for now I just want to try to get through all the skills as quickly as possible. Healing Soul. This is the healing morph of the Wield Soul Scribing skill from the Soul Magic skill line. We are replacing Healthy Offering with this skill. This is a better burst heal than Healthy Offering. The tooltip is about 800 lower. Just standing here naked for me, like without any buffs, the tooltip is 800 lower than Healthy Offering. But Healthy Offering drains 1,000 health, so technically this is netting you the same healing at face value as Healthy Offering. The 2 traits that I've got on it are Druid's Resurgence, which is the restores 100 or 1,000 magicka and stamina, and the 3rd trait I've gone on it is Major Vitality. So Healthy Offering gives you an 8% minor mending, and then gives you a 3% healing done siphoning passive for a total of 11% healing. This skill with Major Vitality is giving you 12% healing. So face value, it heals more and gives you more passive healing than Healthy Offering does. Additionally, the cost of this skill is 4.4k, and Healthy Offering is 3.4k. However, this gives you back 1,000 magicka, which then puts this at the same exact magicka cost as Healthy Offering. Additionally, this gives you 1,000 stamina every time you cast it. That is an absurd amount of stamina sustain. You will notice that you have tons of stamina sustain when you run this compared to Healthy Offering. So highly recommend replacing Healthy Offering with this. And just wanted to point out real quick, the 2 scripts that I have on this, Druid's Resurgence and Major Vitality, those are free. You pick them up in Rawlcaw outside the Mages Guild and in Stormhaven at the Mages Guild. So it takes 20 minutes to do the intro quest to Scribing and get the skill. Highly recommend you do that, if nothing else. Crushing Path, this is Major Expedition, Minor Intellect and Endurance, which is Stamina and Magicka Sustain, and a heal over time. You should just be putting this down all the time whenever you're moving. Temporal Guard, this is just back bar for the 5% mitigation. You can occasionally use this as a defensive ult, but it's pretty buggy, so I wouldn't recommend casting it often. Front bar, we've got Incap. Incap got buffed recently. It does a lot more damage when you cast it with 130 or more ult. And it also lasts 12 seconds now, as opposed to the 6 seconds that it used to last when you cast it with 130 more ult. Because of those 2 buffs, this skill is almost too good to drop now. In the past, I've liked to use Soul Tether, and Soul Tether is nice, don't get me wrong, especially if you're fighting a lot of squishy players. But with the damage that this ability now gives you, it is really hard to justify dropping it. So I'd recommend using Incap. The only other ult that you should be using, if not Incap, is Soul Tether. Merciless Resolve, this is the Spectral Bow. Obviously, you know what this does is the burst ability. Concealed Weapon. This is our spammable. It's Minor Expedition just for being slotted at all times on both bars. Now, this no longer gives you the 10% damage buff that it used to do. What it does is when you leave stealth on either bar, you do not need to be front bar to proc this. You can leave stealth on your back bar, and for 15 seconds, this will do 10% more damage. It hits very hard still. Highly recommend using it. However, if this is on your bar, just remember you have to use Invis Cloak, or else you will not get the bonus. So, Invis Cloak on the bar. This gives us Major Savagery on both bars, another recent buff. So it gives us a ton of crit percent, which is really nice. And obviously it's needed to proc Concealed Weapon. Then we've got Power Extraction. This is our Major Brutality buff, and also an AoE spammable, which is kind of nice. And then the Scribing ability on my front bar, and the reason that I'm using Night Mother's Gaze, is Ulfsild's Contingency, or Fiery Contingency. So this is a Mages Guild Scribing skill. I think you unlock it at Mages Guild 3, if I'm not mistaken. The 3 scripts that I have on this are Flame Damage, Gladiator's Tenacity, which is 8% reduced damage taken for 8 seconds, and Minor Force. This skill is a burst ability. You're going to cast it before doing a lot of other burst-related things. I think this is an overall better choice than Elemental Susceptibility for several different reasons. I'll go over how to use this ability and why I think it's better than Elisus later, but overall, highly recommend slotting this on your bar. Again, this is the reason why I'm using Night Mothers and not a different 5-piece with Elemental Susceptibility. So I'm going to give a brief explanation of how Contingency works, and then we're just going to take a look at some video examples. Try to do this quickly here. So Contingency, the way it works is when you cast the ability, it puts a buff on you, and the next thing that you do that spends resources will proc the Contingency, giving you the damage, the mitigation, and the Minor Force. So that includes casting another ability, casting an ultimate, bashing, dodge rolling, and breaking free. If you do any of those things, Contingency will go off. So for example, if I put the Contingency up, and then I bash, it procs. If I put it up, and I cast Power Extraction, it procs. And if I put it up, and I dodge roll, it procs. So the same thing applies to an ultimate. Ideally, you're putting this up before you incap, you're putting this up before you bow. If you're going for a roll catch, which I explained in my previous, or my first Hybrid Nightblade video, which I'll link in the description, you could put this up while they're dodge rolling before your medium attack to catch them at the off balance. Same thing if you're not roll catching. If they're off balance, you could put this up and then do a medium attack bow. And then as far as maintaining the mitigation buff, the 8% mitigation that you get, you can be casting this once every 8 seconds or so while you're kiting. So even if I'm like kiting around a tower or something and I'm not planning to hit someone, it can still be good for me to put this up and then just go to my back bar and continue doing what I'm doing to maintain the 8% mitigation. Okay, so I just wanted to give a brief video example of me using Contingency in a fight and just kind of explain the burst as I do it. I don't want to spend too much time on that because the video is already so long, but I'll go ahead and I'll play this clip and I'll try to explain each burst as we go along. So I'm engaged with these 2 snipers and a healer. I'm going to go for this first sniper here. So you can see I just put up contingency. The buff is now active on me, and the next thing I do that spends resources will proc the damage. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to incap the sniper in front of me. With the contingency, it's going to go off at the same time. And you can see I just instantly killed that person. He had 29k health or so. And just the light attack into the contingency, or rather the light attack into the incap with the contingency proc just instantly killed him from full health. You can see the incap hit for 15k, the contingency hit for 8.4, and then there were a few other damage things thrown in, like my light attack, my bash, the glyphs, and the status effects going off. But that's one way you can use it. It's an extremely effective way. Probably the highest burst you can do with contingency. So he's dead. I'm going to go for the other sniper here. So I just put up contingency again, as you saw there. And the buff is now, once again, it's active on me. The next thing I do, again, that spends resources, will proc the contingency burst. And I'm going to do a spectral bow contingency on this guy, and then finish him with a concealed bash weave. So I go ahead and I shoot the spectral bow, the contingency goes off, and you can see just from that light attack spectral bow bash with the contingency, I took this guy down to 33% health, and I believe he was at 30k, if I'm not mistaken, or 31k health. So that was roughly a 20k burst right there. And then I'm able to finish him in the next global cooldown with a light attack concealed dash weave. So that guy died. First guy died in 1 global cooldown. The second guy died in 2 global cooldowns. As you can see, contingency, when you're bursting people like this, gives very, very little time for them to react to the damage, especially if they're squishier like these players were. I think it's a better, more 1vx friendly skill than Elemental Susceptibility, because it doesn't require setup time. You just press the ability and then hit someone. You don't have to target them first, and also kind of make them aware that you're going to burst them, because Elisus puts a debuff. Everybody knows what it does, so most people are kind of aware you're going to hit them if you Elisus them. So I think this is a much better 1vx friendly skill than Elisus, and that is why I switched back to Night Mother's Gaze. And I'll go ahead and play the last, me killing this last guy. So I'm going to go Power Extraction. We're going to Cloak. Cloaking again, procs Concealed Weapon. It's going to give me the Vamp passive too. You can cast Contingency while you're in Cloak. It will pull you out of Cloak. As you can see there. Pulls me out. The Contingency buff, once again, is active. And I'm going to go for an Incap on this guy. I believe the Contingency misses because he's running away from me here. Yeah, so it looks like the Contingency missed there. But you can see what I was going for. Again, just putting it up before I burst. Putting it up before I bow. Things like that. Spectral Bow finishes him. Now I'm just going to go ahead real quick and play that in normal speed, just so you can see how quick that actually was. Okay, so I'll go ahead and play this in normal speed now. So here's another example of how quickly you can turn and burn when you're line of sighting using Contingency, and how you don't need to indicate to them that you're going to hit them like you would with Elemental Susceptibility. So I have this 3-man on me here. I'm able to come around this wall, put up Contingency, and then turn on this Mag Sork, incap him with Contingency. That did roughly 26k damage there, maybe even more. I don't know if he had a shield up, but he had 29k health. He's at 3k now. And he's dead in the next global cooldown. So able to turn and burn very, very quickly. And then even further, you can squeeze way more damage into 1 global cooldown than you can when you don't have the skill on your bar. Because it's just another ability that's going off. So this next person who's still on me here, I have my Balorg, I put up a Contingency, and just my light attack concealed Contingency just did about 26k damage, or maybe 22k damage to that guy. I think he had 29k health. So he's off balance now. He's on 20% health. And I did that in another, just 1 single global cooldown of hitting him. Off balance and he's dead. So you can see the skill is very, very 1vx friendly. And lastly, I just wanted to give an example of roll catching with Contingency. So I'm fighting this werewolf here. I set him off balance there. Now this person's off balance. So what I'm going to do immediately is put up another Contingency. He's off balance. My Contingency is up. Now he starts a dodge roll. I'm going to charge a medium attack. And the second he comes out of the dodge roll, I'm going to release the medium attack. and then hit him with a bow or an incap or concealed. But the contingency is also going to come off, effectively giving me 2 abilities that I'm roll catching him with instead of just 1 ability. So he ends the roll dodge. I release the medium, catching him with a stun and the incap. Contingency goes off, hitting him for an extra 4.5k. And then I'm able to finish him in the next global cooldown. So just another really nice way to use this skill. Okay, so now we're going to talk about siphoning attacks just a little bit here, because it did get changed recently. It works very differently now, and it's going to be important to kind of explain this. So again, we're going to look at the tooltip here, and channel a portion of your soul to convert health to 2,600 magicka and stamina, 4.3k health cost. So ignoring the passive part of this, which isn't really relevant to this explanation, whenever you cast this, you are trading health for mag and stam. You do not want to wait until you're out of resources and then try to spam this to get your resources back. Because if you do that, you're going to get yourself killed, because you're going to be on low health, low resources, and you're going to be lowering your health even more trying to get your resources back. You're going to end up just kind of snowballing yourself to death if you always wait until you're low resources to cast this. Instead, you want to be casting this sort of as a matter of routine or course whenever you go to your back bar. So by doing that, let's say you cast it once every 10 seconds, and it's giving you back 2,600 magicka and stamina once every 10 seconds. There's 5 regen ticks in 10 seconds, so you would divide 2,600 by 5, and that's giving you, I don't know, roughly 520 or so equivalent of each recovery just by casting it once every 10 seconds. So it is very, very strong if you use it correctly. So again, just make sure you're casting this frequently while in combat. Do not just wait until you're out of resources to cast it, and you will find that you have better sustain than you've ever had playing Hybrid Nightblade because of this skill. I just also want to point out real quick that you can cast this in stealth. So if you're ever in a real pinch, like you're, for example, low on resources, you can try to get a cloak off and then just cast this a couple of times before, you know, casting a burst heal or whatever to get your health back. It's definitely a viable option if you find yourself in a pinch. Last thing we're going to go over in this video is the Saint and Seducer mythic that we are running. It's not really a hard mythic to understand whatsoever, but I just wanted to explain it real quick and also talk about the add-on that I use to track it. So while in combat, you get 1 of 5 random major buffs every 10 seconds, and enemies within 12 meters of you get 1 of 5 random major debuffs. You have 3 useful damage buffs on this mythic, being Major Berserk, Major Force, and Major Courage. Out of those 3 useful buffs, Major Force is the most damage, with the other 2 being very close to one another. So ideally, if you're on PC, you would use an add-on to track, at least track Major Berserk, Force, and Courage, which is what I do. I don't track Evasion or Resolve. I know the colors of those, and I just know that when I don't have my add-on showing, that I shouldn't be going for a burst because I have one of those 2 up. But I do track these other 3. If you're on console, unfortunately, you're going to have to either memorize the colors of the rings or look at your buff tracker, which is kind of hard on console because it's a mess, honestly. On PC, I use Bandit's UI to track these buffs. I also track the cooldown of the mythic, which you can see right here. This cooldown just tells me how long until the current buff runs out, and I just use this just so I know when I'm going to get a new buff and what to be ready for. So as you can see, I track Major Courage, I track Major Berserk right next to it, and then I track Major Force right on top. Again, Major Force is the most damage of the 3, but Major Berserk and Courage are very similar, and it's totally fine to go for damage while they're up. If you're fighting a tank, a healer, or a good player, and you need as much damage as possible, you're going to want to try to wait for the Major Force proc. Again, I'm using Bandit's UI. I believe Srendar has the same capability, and I'm sure there's plenty of other UI add-ons, but Bandits is the one that I like the most, and you use the widgets setting of Bandits to set this up. So in Bandit's UI, go down to Buffs, Widgets, Manage Widgets, and then, as you can see here, I've got my 4 buffs, or my 3 buffs rather, my cooldown, tracking Ulfsid's over here with Rally and Cry, and all you do to create these tracking things using Bandits is you go to recent buffs. It's going to show you things that you've recently procced. You select the one that you want. So again, I track Force, Resolve, and Courage. And you're just going to, it's going to create, once you select one and you click, actually just selecting one is going to put an icon on your screen. And then you can drag them and arrange them however you want. So On PC, highly recommend you track these buffs. It's going to make the Mythic a lot easier to use. That's going to be it for the build video. I hope that you guys enjoy playing this setup. I know that I have. I think it's the strongest version of this in quite some time now, so it's really been a pleasure to play. If you've got any questions, comments, or feedback, drop it down in the comments section. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this content and want to see more of it, leave a like and a subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.